Hello, welcome back. And today I'm going to talk about my favorite book that I've read so far this year, and that's Jane Eyre by Charlotte Brontë. This book was a delight. The plot, the prose, the pacing, everything was just so much fun from start to finish. I just had such a great time reading this book. And it's definitely not a fluffy book either. I think sometimes this book probably gets mistakenly categorized as a romance, and there is a romance plot to it, but it seems very secondary to what really is the star of the show, and it's Jane Eyre herself. We get to see this character who is so driven, determined, and has just this very tuned moral compass that helps her guide herself through this really turbulent, at some points terrible life. And it ends up happy for her, I would say. Some have complained, at least far in the past, I doubt there's too much contemporary complaint about this book being a hit piece on Christianity, which I think is a bit absurd. If anything, this book is a hit piece on authority figures abusing those that they have power over. And I mean, at this point in time, that did involve church figures, but it doesn't feel particularly targeted at anyone. I think, especially if you look at the character of St. near the end of the book, it's really hard to think that Charlotte Brontë is giving us like a negative opinion of Christianity, because we see this character who is, I think by all accounts, a little bit deluded and trying to be really controlling and doing it in the name of Christianity. And he doesn't seem to realize exactly what he's doing. And Jane, the character in the book, or even Charlotte Brontë, the author, really seems to give him the benefit of the doubt and paint him as an almost heroic figure, even though his actions are really gross. The only other like major example of this is the headmaster of the boarding school that Jane is put in as a child. He's such a minor character. I really think it's a stretch, and I really think you're trying to search for something to be upset about. And really, people should be upset about authority figures abusing those they have power over. So if that makes you upset, you're kind of tattling on yourself a little bit. The book almost reads part mystery too, especially with the Mr. Rochester storyline and his secret hidden wife that he has locked up in his second house up in the attic. I do think there's some really fair complaints that the attic wife is treated subhumanly, and that's definitely how Jane sees the character. And so it's not necessarily like poor writing, but I think in a way it shows kind of like Jane is such a like lovable, heroic character that I think a lot of people would aspire to be and want to be for a lot of good reasons. And I do think that it's interesting to see kind of this negative side of Jane, where she dehumanizes Mr. Rochester's wife. And I mean, that's kind of a complicated subject. And I think one of my friends told me that Charlotte Brontë actually wished that she had made the character a little bit more likable and more human, and kind of regretted that. There's other scenes that would read really problematic to like our modern minds, especially the thing that comes foremost to my mind would be the scene where Mr. Rochester cross dresses with blackface as a gypsy fortune teller to try and fool everybody, but really ignoring the obvious problematic aspects of that. That scene is hilarious and a really, really interesting, great scene. And so I was still glad it was there, even if it made Mr. Rochester a little bit more of a vile character in my mind. And that's one thing that I kind of was surprised about. I feel like I've heard people really romanticize the figure of Mr. Rochester, and he seemed pretty unhinged, would be probably the kindest way of putting it. I was honestly a little bit sad that Jane ended up with him in the end, but the ending does make sense. And yeah, I'm not going to say a ton about this book other than, yeah, I really loved it. I hope everybody else gets a chance to read it.